Good morning, everyone. This is our community development meeting, and it's April 13th, 2023. The time is 10 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, hearing none, I do not have any open remarks. I will poll for conflicts of interest.
None.
None? All right. Our first item is deliberations on MSP. It's Major Subdivision 22-0004 Lakestone Estates, and this is our continuation from the public hearing. And this is where the commissioners talk about their thoughts on this and then hopefully come to an agreement. So, takers, we're going first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I have a prepared statement. I see this as a classic growth issue that happens 1,000 times over in Kootenai County. Individually, these types of developments have little impact on the larger community and county services. Collectively, they are significant. The developer has complied with all agency requests, including adding a throughway. Consequently, this led to the community collecting about 400 signatures out of about 700 residents in favor of stopping the throughway. This is significant. While I don't want to punish the developer, I believe that when a significant portion of the community speaks, it is incumbent upon elected officials to listen. It was also noted in the Community Development Report that KCSO only has 0.56 deputies per 1,000 residents, while Coeur d'Alene, Rathdrum, and Post Falls have 1.74, 1.58, and 1.26 police officers, respectively, per 1,000 residents. I believe it's time that we establish county service levels among the various departments. Community development cannot provide meaningful recommendations to the BOCC if we do not even know what level we're supposed to provide and how these developments may incrementally stress existing county services. I believe it's our job as a board to ensure that growth is responsibly managed. Without fully understanding how this development may or may not further stress existing county service levels, I am open to approving this development under the following conditions. The developer installs a gate with a restricted access code for residents of the community at the throughway and or for emergency vehicles, and the developer modifies the CC&Rs to have meaningful penalties assessed to any resident for breaching the buffer zone, or in lieu of the CC&R modifications, the developer installs a small fence separating the buffer from the end of the lots along the creek.
Okay.
And that's it.
All right. Bill?
I am most concerned about the creek and what might happen to it over time. It also seems to me that a subdivision like this does not fit well in the Bayview community. So it's a nice project, but I'm going to vote against it.
As was stated, the developer followed all the guidelines. So at this point, I think if they meet all their conditions as suggested by the hearing examiner, I don't see that this is going to have a huge impact. I have issues with the road, which I want to ask you a question. So the gate would allow all residents and emergency vehicles?
Yes. It just would not allow the public in general to use that community as a throughway. From what I understood, the community as a whole was not against the development.
Right.
What they were concerned about was the added traffic through what are otherwise very quiet parts of Bayview, but are not throughways.
Okay, so I probably could just support that addition if legally we can do that. Pat?
Yes, you may. It's within your discretion to, impose conditions of approval that are, that have a rational nexus to the impacts of the development.
Okay. Okay, so I like that idea because in general, I mean, Lakes Highway District has a board they are supposed to be responsive to the public. So if the public had issue, they should have been there and taking it up with them. But I like the idea as long as the residents there can go in and out.
Yeah, and I think that, in this particular situation, I don't really feel like the highway board, highway district really took into consideration what the community was saying.
Well, did the community tell them?
Well, and I think that's where a lot of times the board ends up, the BOCC ends up being the place, the de facto place, when, or not always.
Right.
So, and then the only other stipulation was on the,
With the what?
where the lot ends and the buffer zone begins. Because there was a resident that brought up a point, and I thought it was a good point, and I could see this, where once someone buys their home, they want to extend their yard out a little further. And having some way to prevent that, either through, just a 4-foot or 3-foot high chain link fence, so you can still see the wildlife, but the property owner knows that that's the end of their lot. And I don't think that would be expensive just for that one section of the development.
Yes, I don't want to punish people who are going to do the right thing, because I'd be worried about wildlife trying to jump over the fence and go through the fence and that kind of thing. So I would more likely support something. So CC&Rs are required because it's a major subdivision. So then I would say, having the CC&Rs recognize that buffer zone, and then that way we have a civil layer before it gets to our code enforcement, if that makes sense.
Is there
A lot of sense to me.
is there a way to at least mark where those lot lines end so it's clear to residents? Because I don't know how much of their yard will blend in with the buffer zone. And again, I'm only bringing this up because, if the more we can eliminate those gray areas, the better it is, I think, for everyone in the long run.
Yeah, I don't,
I would agree with that. I think there should be something there to denote where the buffer zone begins. That way, there's some certainty, both for purposes of any potential civil litigation or code enforcement action.
so can we leave it to the CC&Rs and the homeowner to say what that delineates? Some people want a fence, some people want stakes, some people want, different things.
I think we should have some minimum level of delineation, and if people want to go beyond that, then they can.
Okay, so I would
That
say,
would help us from a code enforcement standpoint if it gets
Yeah.
to that level.
Yeah.
so then I would say stakes would be the
Yeah.
minimum,
Survey
survey
stakes.
stakes.
As long as it's something that, is clear, inarguable. Because even, sometimes I've seen this now, and again, I'm just trying to address the what ifs. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this, but things just tend to encroach. No one really says anything. The property gets purchased by another person. They go, it's always been this way. What are you doing? Well, I'm getting punished now. And that's why just the more clear we can make that. And if those stakes are not, going to be moved easily or anything like that, and forgive me for my ignorance of this process here, then that's satisfactory and some meaningful CC&Rs, the
I'm
language.
thinking surveyed and marked on the plat.
Yeah.
So it's a plat note.
Okay,
That way, there's at least constructive notice for a buyer. They'll actually see on the face of the plat they get at closing
okay,
that there's this buffer zone.
yeah,
And there's a stick on the,
If the stakes get moved or removed by whomever, then
Okay.
they can be replaced where there should be.
Right.
okay,
okay.
all right. So those are the only two things I think that I would suggest going forward with, in addition to the conditions of approval from the hearing examiner. So you want me to do this? You want to take a stab at it?
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Let me just make some notes here. And stakes in lots, notice and
As far
plats.
as the gate restricting access to
Yeah, that second condition could actually be added to 7.13 because
Okay.
that covers the,
I have 7.13 right here.
yeah. And I think the other one would be a new condition.
Okay. Yeah, so 713 talks about the 75-foot stream protection buffer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh, so this, okay, so
Just
the
add that language to it.
7.13, okay.
yeah. And then the other one's just going to have to be 7.19.
7.19.
Yeah, unless, Pat, can we add it to the place where it talks about the road? Because I think it goes through all the different things they're supposed to do.
Yeah, it does, but I think, 7.05 deals with the condition or the requirements of the highway district. And so just to be,
Clear that it's a separate condition, sure? Yep.
just to be safe and, and clear.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I move that we approve MSP 22-0004 Lakestone Estates with the following conditions: that the developer installs a gate at the road between that development and an existing neighborhood with a code for residents and emergency vehicles to access, as well as to amend section 7.13, where the developer will add survey stakes on the lots where the buffer zone is, that there will be a notice in the plats, and that there will be additional language in the CCNRs if a homeowner breaches or extends their into the buffer zone.
Okay, and that's in addition to the conditions recommended by the hearing examiner.
In addition to the conditions recommended by the hearing examiner.
I'll second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
No,
Commissioner Matari,
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right, MSP 22-0004 has been approved, and we can move on to our business item. It is the 2024 budget for community development. Okay, let's see.
Oh, this
Thank
is
you.
electronic.
Yeah. Yeah, I started pulling it up.
Hard copies. And if I may, this won't necessarily need to be a work in progress discussion, because Reba is the brainchild behind most of this, and was out on emergency medical leave Friday. And she's fine, but
Okay.
she can't be here for another week and a half.
Oh, wow.
But I can certainly hit the high points. And for me, the high points are on the back of the first page where we're asking for 3 new vehicles. And Keith knows about that. And it's just because some of our vehicles are old and it costs more to fix them than it does to have new ones.
Sure. All right, and have you already submitted your application to fleet management?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I believe all that's taken care of.
Okay. All right, so then they'll come forward during the budget season with their recommendations, and then we'll be
Right.
able to move on that there. Okay?
Another high-level thing that we haven't actually worked through yet and doesn't show up in here is we need to upgrade our fees again. Because you'll recall that the last time we did that, it was a pretty big shift. Commissioner Matari, you weren't here, but it was a big change from where we were, but that all happened before the last round of salary increases. And so, of course, we need to accommodate for that. And now that we've actually watched some of this for some time, we've got some new ideas we would like to run by you. One today, for instance, which is we don't currently charge for pre-application meetings. And I'm thinking we could, especially for the ones like cases that end up in front of you today. where that kind of pre-application meeting typically takes a planner 3 to 4 hours of time just to have a pre-meeting with the developer, because there's all kinds of background information that needs to be shared. You know, we're checking the zoning, we're checking the transportation system, so on and so forth. So 3 to 4 hours of planning time adds up pretty quickly that we're not charging for at the moment. What I would continue to do, and I know it's been a concern by previous boards, is we wouldn't charge like we currently don't charge for the current planners to just have conversations with people at the front counter when they come in and they just want to chat. But where I'd kind of like to draw a line, if you're okay with it, is once we know that that an applicant really wants to pursue a new zoning case or a conditional use permit or a variance, and they come in and meet with Vlad or Amy, and it's that 3 or 4 hour meeting, that's the one I'd like to charge for. We don't have a number behind it yet, but Ben's working on it with the assistance of the accounting staff.
Well, we have currently a pre-app fee of $105. It just hasn't been being charged.
Right, and I'm thinking that's not enough. Have you looked at it?
Yeah, I think we've found that it doesn't cover the cost that staff puts into it, first off. And then secondly, we do not charge that for all the pre-apps that we do. What we do charge is for those that materialize to an actual project. But we're finding that we're about 30% of those meetings actually materialize to a project, where the other 60 or so, 70% is just people kicking tires kind of a thing, and staff puts the same amount of time into those, but it doesn't compensate it in any way. So we'd like to actually apply that more globally to every pre-application meeting that we conduct.
Does that make sense to you?
Well, every pre-application that's going to take 3 to 4 hours.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what staff puts into, we do research beforehand to make sure the parcel is eligible, make sure that the use is compatible with this area and so on. And then that can range around, an hour, because there is some other staff that comes into it, as well as just the current planner who's conducting the meeting to prepare for the meeting. And then the actual meeting itself is an hour at least.
An hour. Right.
And then what we do as a follow-up is to email them summarizing the conversation, recommendations for them so that they can begin, whether considering pursuing this application or not.
And that actually goes into IMS,
That goes in IMS.
which
yes.
is our tracking software.
Right.
So I think, a good number for us is about 3 hours of staff time spent per pre-application meeting. Again, the 105 that we're currently charging for that, feel that it is undercharged, and then again, not applied to
Is
as
universally.
many as we'd
So
like.
can you classify it by, like CUPs, major subdivisions, that kind of thing get charged the 3 hours? Or is it just mom and pop coming in wanting to take their 15 acres and make 3 5s?
I suppose we certainly could take a look at different projects. It's hard to say, because some, again, like we're just looking at a minor subdivision, one that's over the prairie that has very limited risk is a lot easier to conduct. And whether that's done by a mom or pop or a developer, we don't know.
Sure.
Or a 4-lot minor subdivision, again, somewhere on the hillside that has a lot more challenges, it may be a lot hard, more difficult meeting. So it'd be hard to, I think, apply in those circumstances.
So could we say something like, okay, pre-application meeting is $100. However, if more staff time exceeds this, then it will be a maximum of that.
Or you could just say, X fee for X hour, X fee for Y hours plus, Z dollars per hour, in excess of that.
Okay.
Well,
There are
So
actually
it's a
few-
formula.
Yeah, there are actually a few
I think you're going to end up in a,
that are like that.
I think you'll find yourself in a collections mode more so than not, because now you're saying, well, we don't know how long it's going to be, but you're going to pay something until we figure out afterwards. I think you're much better served just to try to develop a basic metric, knowing that some meetings are going to be longer, some are going to be shorter, but you're collecting the money up front, and then you move on, and however long it takes is however long it takes.
So that it's a closer approximation.
Everyone's charged the same amount, but it's for the service, it's not for your time.
Right.
Right, it just means that it'll be subsidized for mom and pop who want a minor subdivision compared to these people here who want, a major subdivision with conditions and stuff. So that's what I just don't really want to do. I don't want to punish the person who doesn't stand to make, a lot of money off their project versus, just pay for the service you get.
Well, who's paying for it now?
Arguably the community.
Yeah.
It sounds like we need to at least get that off of their plate and onto the applicants somehow.
Right.
Just out of curiosity, this bottom number on page 2, that's for the 2024 request, is that the cost number? And then on this document here is the revenue number?
Which one are you looking at on
This is the very,
first page?
yes,
And you're looking at the back of
yes.
where it says 24?
And there's 23 versus 24, the very bottom number.
5% increase.
The 5.84% increase. Is that cost?
Yes.
Okay. And then this number, this green revenue total, that's what's brought in.
Right.
And so if I were to take the green number and subtract the cost number, that would be the spread in essence.
If you go to this page here, let's scroll down. Projected revenue for '24,
Right.
projected expenses, we're looking at a $1.3 million deficit.
Got it.
And that doesn't include the wages that we're trying to,
Right. We
Okay.
still need to factor in.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, so that's without the fee increase.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a
That's
lot.
where I'm sure we'll get closer. I don't know how close. yet.
Yeah. Are there other fees that are not on here that probably should be?
Yeah, I think what we are considering, currently, there is not a fee for a request for reconsideration,
Yeah.
which staff spends, many hours preparing for. So that's one thing that we wanted to include. Another is that, again, just general public hearing requests before the board is something that we don't charge for. And so a member of the public asks for a public hearing. Again, that's additional staff time that's
They
spent.
pay the hard cost for mailing, but not the soft cost of staff time.
Right, yes,
And that's
thank
the
you.
real expense.
Yeah, the mailing cost is
Nominal.
$40, $50 maybe.
Yeah.
I just want to be careful not to step in the way of due process. If somebody can't afford to, request a public hearing, and so then that's it, they're just out of luck because they don't have money. I don't think that's,
Well, that's why we're having this dialogue.
sure.
Is there a point in between those two extremes that you'd be comfortable?
Well, is there not a way to amortize the public hearing fee as part of the overall fee? So it's a much smaller amount, but it's included in some other component? I mean, knowing that, again, if you look at by year, you're going to have X number of public hearings, and you're spreading that expense out at a much smaller amount to everyone. And again, it's almost like a small fee that everyone pays, but it's way less than what it costs, but it's at your discretion whenever you have that opportunity. And again, I'm just exploring different ways that we don't have to have the homeowner,
Yeah, I know
bear this.
1.3 million is just under our taxing authority. So that's huge.
Because it seems like those fees, because I agree with Commissioner Duncan, you can't price people out of, their due process rights. However, that doesn't mean that we can't amortize that fee into, the the most numerous activity that you participate in that you do charge a fee, and so it becomes, it's almost like a little insurance policy in essence, but it's not.
It'd be a coefficient. We
was
could
gonna
come
s-
up, yeah,
Go ahead, Dave.
we could come up with a coefficient that we tack on
Right.
to the fee schedule based on our experience of total number of hearings over 5 years or something.
And if, the concern is due process, which I think is, certainly a valid concern. We might want to look at the appeal fee as well as part of that, as a part of that analysis as well, because that's another due process
Yeah.
consideration.
That's something that we currently do have in the fee schedule.
Yeah, that's correct. So I was just saying, look at that fee and see if it needs to change based on
So just reevaluate
same
it.
factors, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is not something we have to hash out today. I mean, you're still
Understood.
working with Brandy.
This
and-
gives me an idea where you'd like to go.
Okay.
That helps a lot, thanks.
All right, so that's expenses and revenues, and now you've got more good stuff for us.
Each of these yellow sheets is a position that has created some sort of turmoil over time. By backing up, give you a 30,000 look down on the department. And in the 9.5 years that I've been here, 38 staff have left.
Wow.
There's only 40 in the department. There's 2 people, one to my right, that have been here longer than me. The other's Vlad. That should tell you something.
Yeah.
And I believe the last round of money for staff made a huge difference. And of course, we'll catch up with some of that on fees. But part of our issue is explained in each one of these yellow sheets where people, in some cases now like George, have been here for long enough. I think he deserves to be a step up. Similarly, our clerk positions are jacks of all trade. They meet at the front counter with everyone. They have to know the entire department and how things work, but we pay them as if they were entry level at a restaurant,
Right.
frankly.
So are you looking for guidance for us to tell you which to bring to HR?
Well, if there's anything that just fries you, let me know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the first one, if we just go one by one, the clerks, yeah, I would say definitely maybe consider that as a reclassification.
Okay.
So that one can go to HR. Thoughts on that one?
I mean, overall, I'm fine with the idea of getting people to where they're supposed to be, as long as we incorporate that into our fee structure and kind of do this in a more holistic approach.
Okay.
All right, so then code compliance officer. So are you asking for position conversion? So you have 2 right now. Do you have a 1 and a 2, or do you have 2 1s?
We have a 1 and a 2.
Okay, but you would like 2 2s.
Yes.
Okay, so the problem with that is if the experience leaves, we'll have to go back down
Yeah.
probably to a 1.
That's true.
Yeah. So I'm fine to bring that forward. I don't know that, I have no idea when we're going to have our numbers.
Understood.
So, all right, so now the customer service tech to admin assistant. So, yeah, that's fine to bring, in my mind, fine to bring forward to HR. Bill, do you have any issues on any of these?
Later on, I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. Landscape architect.
That's the one. I
okay.
want to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. You may recall, I brought this up earlier, because this is the spot, it could be either a landscape architect or a professional engineer, it doesn't matter. If it's a PE, it needs to be one that specializes in civil engineering. Because you may know, PEs can be electronic, they can be civil, they can be chemical,
Right.
A PE doesn't necessarily mean you know anything about civil engineering. So whichever way we go, it needs to be a civil engineer or a landscape architect. Because being a landscape architect, I can tell you, you can't get through landscape architecture school without knowing the same grading and stormwater drainage and other design work that a civil engineer knows. That's where there's overlap. But back to the reason for this. Since '97, we've had on the books site disturbance permit requirements. We have never had a person, other than me, that actually knows how to do those kinds of plans. So the planners are looking at this stuff, trying to figure out if it makes sense. They don't necessarily have the training. Some planning schools are better than others, some few. But one of the problems we have with site disturbance permits, and Ben knows this better than anyone, when I first got here and you were dealing with Rob Tate, I don't mind dropping that name. It got pushed back 12 times, and he's a civil engineer, professional engineer, before we actually got a plan we could deal with. Part of that issue is speaking the same language. And you know from your experience, just like accountants speak the same language, landscape architects, engineers, architects all speak the same language. Unless you can go there and help people understand not that, this, we keep having this back and forth stuff that just drives me crazy. So that's the rationale for the new position.
Can I ask, is that in lieu of like a civil engineer? So it's
Yes.
you get a lot of the same skill sets without the same price tag.
They're roughly equivalent. A landscape architect's roughly equivalent to a civil engineer.
Just out of curiosity, then, would it not make sense to seek a civil engineer, or?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten that far. I
Okay.
brought up with HR yesterday this idea. They're doing the research and the math now just to find out how we would word the job description.
Yeah.
And then I'll get back to you with where we land on what the actual costs are.
Okay.
David, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How much have we been spending on, engineering services, especially, review of site disturbance permits and that kind of, and potential violations?
Thanks
you
for
know,
bringing
like
that up.
Like
Yeah.
Ashley or whomever, and what line item does that come out of?
I'll have to break it out and bring it back because I don't know, but it's
Okay.
on the order of more than 10,000 a year. Probably. Do you have any idea?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm just looking at perhaps maybe at last
Is
year.
that,
Well, if we're paying $10,000 a year and this is $135,000 a year, I might stick with the 10,000.
I'm sure it's more than that,
Okay.
but I don't know how much more.
Well, it's probably worth getting those numbers.
Yeah,
Just so
and
we can kind of
Seeing
compare.
what the best option might be.
All right, so that one, so HR will actually have to write a job description.
Yes.
Okay. I'm fine if that goes to HR at this point, unless you rather have the numbers first. Is that?
No, because
Well, there's also the opportunity cost of not having a PE or LA review plans that, might be a little iffy, but not so iffy that, they decide to spend the money on it. So there's that to figure into. I couldn't put a number on that necessarily.
And that actually is one of the biggest time-consuming things we have. We talked about it this morning with a case where the homeowner blew out a hillside in a very steep neighborhood, trespassed on the neighboring property. None of that showed up on the homeowner's plan that the staff reviewed. But now we're in the position where we've got trespass, we've got $20,000, $30,000 worth of excavation on a neighbor's property. Don't know how this is going to work out, but if we'd have had someone up front looking at that kind of plan with the background of the county, knowing this steep site, we probably wouldn't have issued that homeowner's building permit and site disturbance plan when we did. And now I'm in the weirdness of I can't unchisel this stone.
Right.
And it's just going to take time to go back and forth with the owner, their neighbor, and figure out what we're going to do with this.
Try to avoid a lawsuit.
Yeah, so I don't know how we frame that, but they're there are costs associated with mistakes of the
Yeah,
past.
that's what I was framing as opportunity.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we should proceed, but, when it comes time to the final decision, I think, it would help if you could put that information together, because it may be worth having a contract with somebody for the next year, and, on an on-call status, until we really, now they're exceeding that expense, and it makes
Yeah,
sense
that
to
way,
bring.
you can make the best informed decision you can, even if you stick with the contract this year, even at some point, you may want to, it may get to the point where you say, okay, we should have this on staff in a future fiscal year.
Okay. All right, and then I think the last one is building inspector and senior building inspector. So what we may be able to consider as well, depending on finances, is taking this and even the code compliance office. And there's other departments that have, when they get certifications, they get $1 more an hour. So instead of changing the job description, instead of changing the grade and all that, this is like, okay, you've reached this level, here's your $1.
Oh,
You've reached this level, here's your
that'd
$1.
be convenient.
Yes, and then that way, when if hopefully they don't leave, but if they retire, then
You
bring
go back
somebody
to
back
where
in.
you start?
Yeah, instead of changing now job descriptions and grades and kind of all that stuff.
I
So,
like that idea.
Okay,
Is there a prototype already in place?
Yeah.
that
yeah.
HR would know about it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they would.
I have a question, if you're done. I'm just curious, what would be the normal turnover in a department like yours? I mean, because you know that people aren't going to stay forever. And some jobs are 3 to 5 years, some are 1 to 2 years, it just depends. Some are 10.
It's changed over time. When I was a young man, it was typical for people to stay at jobs 5 to 10 years. Now it's typical to be 2.5 to 5.
Yeah.
18 months is the average now.
Yeah,
So that's just the labor market that we're in.
Yeah,
So,
if you can find them.
yeah, if you can find them to begin with, then
Yeah.
that's just, and, a friend of mine's daughter got lots of jobs at the county, very well qualified, and she's rather work as a barista.
Hmm.
So, which is fine. I mean, she loves it. She's doing that, but a lot of kids don't want professional careers, and I just don't know how to operate in that world because we have to have people to provide a service. So,
Yeah, I get it. When I was in my 20s, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do either, so.
yeah. Well, and that's another thing we need is lawyers. Just not graduating from law school and just
Right,
not having them, so.
yeah, and that's, despite, for example, U of I basically doubling its size, having 2 campuses. And, our side, we're sitting really good. Our least experienced attorney just passed her 15-year mark.
Right.
But on the criminal side, they do get some turnover, and LPD's office gets quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, PD's office is just dang hard work.
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
not that any of your
I
jobs
have-
are easy.
No, I have total respect for them, actually.
Yeah. So that they just have an added element to deal with that we don't. So, I'm good. Any other thoughts, questions?
well, this is very helpful.
No, thank you.
Bill, all
I'm
good?
good. I saw 4 new vehicles. What do you got now? What do you have now?
How many vehicles do we have?
Yeah.
12 total,
And they're,
but
a
3
number
of
of
them need
them
to
are
go.
pretty much toast.
3 of them need to go.
Yeah.
You gonna be able to get four-wheel drive vehicles for $45K apiece?
I don't
Yeah.
know. I keep
This market
saying
Should
we
be.
can,
If
but-
they're escapes, they should be.
Okay, yeah, and fleet purchase.
Yes. Yeah. So that's
I
why.
just saw that and I'm like,
Yeah.
just knowing what the market's
It's
like.
surprising, but
Yeah. So fleet management will be able to rank all the requests this year and bring them forward. So, all right.
all right, thank you.
Nothing further budget related. 10:39, meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Ben.